SITREP World Briefing for May 28, 2026. The United States carried out new strikes near Bandar Abbas on May 28, targeting Iranian one-way attack drones and a ground control station close to the Strait of Hormuz, according to American military statements carried across multiple reports. The action marked a second U.S. strike on Iran within days after an April ceasefire and ongoing negotiations intended to end the three-month war between Washington and Tehran. Iran responded by saying it had targeted a U.S. base in the Gulf region, with the Revolutionary Guard cited as carrying out retaliation after the American attack near Hormuz. The exchange was described as the most serious clash since the ceasefire began. The latest confrontation also affected energy markets because the Strait of Hormuz is one of the world's most important maritime choke points for oil shipments, and any military action near Bandar Abbas carries immediate commercial consequences. Reports said oil prices jumped after the U.S. attacks. Israel launched heavy strikes around the southern Lebanese city of Tyre on May 28 after the Israeli military ordered residents to leave areas it had designated as combat zones. Israeli statements said the operation was aimed at Hezbollah infrastructure, and the bombardment followed sweeping evacuation warnings that affected a large area of southern Lebanon around one of the country's main coastal cities. The evacuation orders were notable for their scale, with reports saying Israel instructed Lebanese residents to leave territory amounting to about 17% of the country before the strikes intensified. Tyre is a strategic coastal hub in the south, and expanded Israeli operations there signal a wider effort to push Hezbollah activity away from the border area. The strikes around Tyre fit into a broader pattern of cross-border conflict between Israel and Hezbollah that has repeatedly displaced civilians and drawn military activity deeper into Lebanese territory. Israel is signaling that areas of southern Lebanon are being treated as an active battle space in which movement, civilian presence, and infrastructure are being sharply restricted. The United Nations said on May 28 that global average temperatures are likely to remain at or near record levels not only in 2026, but through 2030. The forecast cited a 75% chance that the average temperature for the 2026 to 2030 period will exceed 1.5 degrees Celsius pre-industrial levels, a threshold that has become a central benchmark in international climate diplomacy and in governments' own adaptation planning. The warning matters because the UN is not describing a single year, but a multi-year period in which heat is expected to stay elevated across the planet, shaping policy debates on agriculture, water, energy systems, and disaster preparedness. A 5-year average above 1.5 degrees Celsius would not mean the Paris Agreement target is formally lost, because that benchmark is measured over a longer term. But it would indicate how close governments are moving to the limits they pledged to avoid and how little room remains for delay on emissions cuts. By framing the outlook through 2030, the UN also increased the diplomatic pressure on countries preparing new climate commitments for the end of this decade. The significance extends beyond headline temperature records. Repeated years of extreme warmth increase the likelihood of more intense heat waves, heavier rainfall, and broader economic disruption, making the forecast relevant to ministers negotiating energy transitions, city officials managing infrastructure, and public health agencies planning for sustained stress rather than isolated emergencies. Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed and the ruling Prosperity Party held their final rally before Ethiopia's general election, which is due on Monday, as the campaign entered its closing stretch. Abiy's party is widely expected to win re-election, but the final days before voting have also highlighted a challenge from opposition groups that argue the process is undemocratic. Opposition forces called for a nationwide protest ahead of the vote, saying the election is being conducted under conditions of intimidation and excessive state control. The National Election Board denied permission for the planned protest. The election is politically significant because Abiy governs a country where war, regional fragmentation, and disputes over federal power have transformed every national vote into a test of state legitimacy. For the opposition, The closing window has become a chance to document what it says are systemic obstacles, making turnout, access, and the credibility of the process central questions as Ethiopians prepare to vote. U.S. President Donald Trump said on May 28th that he would support Prime Minister Nikol Pashinyan in Armenia's June 7th parliamentary election. The vote is serving as a test of Pashinyan's government at a moment when Armenia is confronting intense political argument over its direction. The disinformation environment around the election has worsened rapidly. Artur Papian, director of the Armenian fact-checking organization FIP.am, said misinformation circulating online had increased tenfold since the start of May. In that setting, Trump's backing gave Pashinyan added international visibility. For Armenia, the significance of the episode goes beyond one endorsement. Parliamentary elections determine who controls the government in Yerevan, and in a small security-exposed state, outside political signals can carry unusual weight when voters are already sorting through manipulated claims at scale. The combination of Trump's explicit support for Pashinyan and a documented surge in misinformation means Armenian institutions, campaign teams, and civil society groups now face a dual challenge in the final days: persuading voters and defending the information space in which those voters make their decision. The World Health Organization warned that the Ebola outbreak in Eastern Democratic Republic of Congo is deteriorating in North Kivu, where fighting has sharply complicated efforts to contain transmission. WHO Chief Tedros Adhanom Ghebreyesus stated that insecurity is hampering the work needed to find cases, reach communities, and prevent the virus from spreading farther across a province that has repeatedly been at the center of armed violence. North Kivu matters far beyond a single outbreak zone because it sits on a heavily traveled corridor near Uganda and Rwanda, and years of militia activity have repeatedly disrupted public health campaigns there. In practical terms, an Ebola response depends on rapid detection, isolation, contact tracing, safe burials, and vaccination, but each of those steps becomes harder when roads are insecure and health teams have limited access. The latest warning indicates that the crisis is not only medical, but also logistical and security-related, with frontline workers trying to keep basic services running while violence restricts movement and drains already thin resources. A record May heatwave drove unusually high temperatures across Western Europe, with Ireland topping 30°C and Portugal nearing 37°C as the hot spell spread across the region. The burst of heat stood out not only because of the numbers reached, but because it arrived so early in the season, delivering midsummer-like conditions before June. The episode fits a broader pattern in which heat records are being broken by larger margins. A heat dome helped trap warm air over Western Europe, amplifying temperatures from the Atlantic fringe to the Iberian Peninsula. Ireland rarely sees 30°C in May, and Portugal approaching 37°C at the same point in the calendar illustrates how events once considered exceptional are becoming more plausible earlier in the year. Sources and the full written briefing are available at sitrepbrief.com.